Israel launched its most intense airstrikes on the occupied West Bank in nearly 2 decades. Israel sent hundreds of ground troops into a crowded Jenin refugee camp, trying to root out armed militants after a year of escalating violence there. Israel's deadly raid began shortly after 1 a.m. on Monday. It included several missiles that were fired by drones. The operation was mainly focused on militant targets in the refugee camp, and at least 8 Palestinians unfortunately were killed in the attack. Over 50 are still injured. While Israel said it was putting a stop to Jenin to being a refuge for terrorism, Palestinians, on the other hand, have accused Israel of a war crime, of hurting innocent, defenseless people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Jenin operation will last as long as required. Perhaps 24 more hours is what they're looking at. Now, this has become a stronghold of a new generation of Palestinian militants. They've become deeply frustrated by the Palestinian Authority's leadership and the restrictions that have been put on them of the Israeli occupation. The city has seen repeated Israeli military raids in the last 1 year. Local Palestinians have carried out deadly attacks on Israelis as well, which is why we saw this retaliation that has lasted for over 24 hours now.
A deadly raid on the city of Jenin, one of the biggest Israeli operations in the occupied West Bank in 2 decades. Israel used drone strikes on Monday for only the second time since 2006. Hundreds of its troops were also involved in long gun battles. The Jenin Brigades, a unit made up of militant groups based in a crowded refugee camp, said it was engaging Israeli forces and had shot down one of the drones. Meanwhile, Israeli armoured bulldozers ploughed up roads in the camp, as this video shows, interrupting city water supplies. The camp has been at the heart of an escalation of violence across the West Bank that has triggered mounting alarm from Washington to the Arab world. Palestinian medic Salah Mansour said they'd treated critically injured people inside the camp.
As medics, we're anxious because the Israeli strikes don't differentiate between medics or civilians or members of the resistance. The Israeli raid today was a very tough one. It was tough for medics as well as civilians who are inside the camp. There are many cases of women who were suffocating, pregnant women. And we treated many people who were having panic attacks.
An Israeli military spokesperson said Monday's operation deployed a brigade-sized force, suggesting around 1,000 to 2,000 troops. It showed the growing importance of the camp, where hundreds of fighters from militant groups, including Hamas, Islamic Jihad and Fatah, are based, with an array of weapons and a growing arsenal of explosive devices. The Israeli military said it struck a building that served as a command centre for fighters from the Jenin Brigades. Army raids in Jenin and other West Bank cities have grown frequent in the past year, alongside a series of deadly attacks by Palestinians against Israelis and rampages by Jewish settler mobs against Palestinian villages.
3 people were killed after overnight drone strikes by Israeli forces in the West Bank. Residents of the city of Jenin say an ensuing gun battle lasted into Monday morning. The Jenin Brigades, a unit comprised of different military groups based in the city's large refugee camp, said it was engaging Israeli forces. The Israeli military said it had struck a brigade's command center in the camp in what it described as a, quote, counterterrorism effort. Khaled Al-Ahmad is a Palestinian ambulance driver who helped transport the injured to the hospital.
What's going on in this refugee camp is real war. There were strikes from the sky targeting the camp. Every time we drive in, around 5 to 7 ambulances come back full with injured people.
An aerial photograph provided by the Israeli military showed what it said was the target, which neighbored 2 schools and a medical center in a densely packed area that houses around 14,000 people in less than a quarter square mile. At least 6 drones were seen circling the city. The drone strikes are the second by Israel in the West Bank in less than 2 weeks. The first strike, which killed 3 militants near Jenin, was the first in the West Bank in 15 years. The next morning, the streets were filled with black smoke and calls to support the fighters from mosque loudspeakers. For over a year, violence in the area has escalated sharply, raising international alarm. In addition to raids in Jenin, the violence has included a series of deadly attacks by Palestinians against Israelis and rampages by Jewish settler mobs against Palestinian villages. Israel captured the West Bank, which the Palestinians see as the core of a future independent state, along with East Jerusalem and Gaza in the 1967 Middle Eastern War. Following decades of conflict, peace talks have been frozen since 2014.
My colleague joins us to get us the latest from on ground and what exactly has been the trigger. Now, Abhishek, these air raids that we saw over the last 24 hours, the troop deployment from Israel's side in the last 24 hours is perhaps the largest military operation that Israel has launched in this area in 2 decades. So what was this particular trigger for this particular instance?
So there has been, regular attacks from these camps or other places which host a lot of refugees, because of the West Bank occupation of Israel. For a very long time, Jenin, the refugee camp, has been the hotspot in Israel's perspective for, young brigade who is taking up arms increasingly against Israeli occupation and Israeli forces, and they have been attacking Israeli forces in the past also. So to deal with that, apparently Israel has taken this one of the largest steps in decades, where hundreds of security personnel have been deployed. Aerial attacks have also happened. Drones are being used. Rockets are being fired from the Israeli side. Also wherever they see that those armed rebels or armed attackers are very much present. Overall, 9 deaths have been reported so far, and the oldest among them have been a 23-year-old. So that clearly shows the kind of young who have been opposing Israel in that region. They are being targeted by Israeli forces. Jenin camp has been a very, very turbulent past also. We know another reporter, very senior reporter, Abu Shirin, was killed by Israeli forces while covering Israeli conflict in that region. She was killed by Israeli forces bullet. So this has happened in the past also, but this time it looks like way bigger than that used to be in the past. Meanwhile, there has been widespread concern also from the international community. Turkish officials have expressed their concern. Jordan has expressed their concern. UN has expressed their concern. Meanwhile, White House has remained very categorical in saying that Israel has a right to defend itself from the terrorist arms of Hamas and other outfit, but at the same time there should not be any civilian casualty. That has been a very balanced approach of Washington on the issue that is currently raging in Jenin, and there has not been any timeline as to when this whole operation by the Israeli forces will end. Some of them have said that maybe from few hours to few days this whole operation will end, and this time the target is to clean all the terrorists who are hiding in that refugee camp, because and taking shield off the civilians who are very much present in that camp.
And we had, Abhishek, Benjamin Netanyahu also come out and say that for as long as needed, this operation will go on. There's also the domestic compulsions that the Israeli government faces, which is why we're seeing this kind of onslaught, isn't it? Because within Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government has been facing criticism of how they haven't reacted enough or haven't reacted in equal measure to the kind of attacks that have been emanating from this particular region.
Of course, in fact, Netanyahu is very much known for being a very hardcore nationalist and anti-Hamas. In fact, he is known for taking strong military action against those perpetrators and those attackers on Israeli forces. So, continuing with his track record now, that has been a major intelligence operation going on from the Israeli side, and after that this operation was launched, and we have seen it's been almost 24 hours, more than 24 hours in fact, and the security forces of Israel are very much present in that region. There are mosques, there are civilian establishment, homes where apparently those armed youth are hiding, and Israeli forces are trying to locate them and eliminate them or forcing them to surrender. So this has been the modus operandi so far. 9 people have been killed. We don't know yet if this will be the largest and probably the last operation from the Israeli side, because the Jenin camp has a history of re-emerging as a hotspot for those attackers or those armed outfits who get young youth from that place and try to brainwash them or try to prepare them for future wars against Israeli forces. So that has been the kind of thing in the past also, and Hamas and other terrorist outfits which very much operate from the Palestinian lands against Israeli forces have been recruiting so many young people or students or youth from that region. So this time probably Israel is on an all-out war against those who have been a concern or a challenge for the security personnel of Israel.